So it's all part of a series of youth parliaments organized by the Ministry of Youth Development, geared at, of course, allowing young people a platform to express themselves on issues of national interest. And so this is yet another event of this nature. And we'd like to give you a sense right away of the resolution for this St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament, whereas healthcare in Grenada is a public good which should be equitably accessed by all citizens, and whereas the government has a responsibility to provide quality healthcare services to all citizens, regardless of their economic situation, with the aim of improving the health of the people of the state of Grenada. And whereas the current model of health financing through tax revenue is unsustainable, and government is therefore committed to finding alternative means of financing health care. And whereas government has assessed these alternatives and proposes to fulfill this commitment through a national health insurance program, and whereas the youth parliamentarians of the parish of St. Patrick have considered the proposals for this national health insurance program and deem it to be an appropriate mechanism for sustainable financing for Grenada's public health sector, be it resolved that the Youth Parliament of the parish of St. Patrick urges the government of Grenada to immediately establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposals. So that is in fact the resolution for the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament, which is set to get underway in a few moments. Of course, already the hall is being filled with attendees. We're talking young people, we're talking not so old, not so young, but a coming together of the minds to listen to debate on this resolution. We want to give you a sense of the personalities for this event right now. Relative to the government side of things, the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Shondell Joseph, Minister for Education, Human Resource and Religious Affairs, Darren Gordon, Minister for Health, Vasil Allen, Minister for Disaster Management and Information, Rihanna Neptune, Minister for Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment, Laurie Mars, Minister for Social Security and International Business, Karina Noel, Minister for Culture, Radisha Joseph, Minister for Legal Affairs, Gideon George, and Minister for Youth Development, Vonel Samuel. So, of course, members of the government side. So, as is being said, the event will get underway in about 5 minutes. And so once this happens, we will bring you all the coverage of what's going on here at the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament, of course, the venue, the MacDonald College. Right, moving right along to members of the opposition side, Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Health, Member for Lower Hermitage, Nazinga Smith, Shadow Minister for Education, Human Resource and Religious Affairs, Member for La Fortune, Shonalyn Hall, Shadow Minister for Youth Development and Sports, Member for Riversally, Kadina Cornwall, Shadow Minister for Finance, Member for Snell Hall, Matthew Williams, and of course, Shadow Minister for Legal Affairs, Member for CEDAS, and Della Hippolyte. So there you go, a sense of members of both sides, government as well as the opposition. Of course, just to remind you in a nutshell of the resolution, be it resolved that the Youth Parliament of the Parish of St. Patrick urges the government of Grenada to immediately establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposals. Of course, there's been a lot of talk about the National Health Insurance, and there's a talk relative to whether it's going to be the ideal fit for Grenadians. There's talk of how is it being funded. There's talk of its sustainability. There's a lot of talk regarding the rollout of national health insurance for Grenada. Of course, government has been putting a lot of infrastructure in place for the successful implementation of it. We no doubt look forward to the debate this afternoon by the young ones expressing themselves on the resolution. So we invite you to stay with us. If you're not tuning in to the live, of course, on MyGi Live, as well as the Government Information Service, GIS, thank you so much for doing so. And look forward to this debate right here at the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament. Now, just to give you a deeper sense of how things will roll out today, once the parliamentary proceedings get on the way, of course we will make way for the actual debate to happen. And once the debate concludes, we will return to provide a summary of the proceedings. We'll also interview a few participants as well as government officials who are with us this afternoon. So this promises to be another interesting event. Of course, we've had already the St. Andrew's Parish Youth Parliament. Now today, St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament. And to give you a heads up, there'll be a national sitting coming up on Friday. Of course, that too will be an event to look forward to, no doubt, among young people and just the general population of Grenada and beyond. So thank you again for joining us, and we appreciate your presence with us. Spending the time, no doubt, on this live is very important to us because we recognize you could be doing other things at this time. So very shortly, we will see the official start of the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament right here at MacDonald College. To stay with us for that. Okay. So, going straight.
Honorable Kate Lewis, Minister responsible for youth development within the Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture and the Arts. Honorable Pamela Moses, Parliamentary Representative for St. Patrick East. Mr. Clifton Paul, former Parliamentary Representative for St. Patrick East. Mr. Earl Williams, Acting Deputy Coordinator of Youth Development within the Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture and the Arts. Ms. Susan Jones-Benjamin, Acting Chief Cultural Officer within the Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture and the Arts, as well as our staff of the Ministry of Youth, specially invited guests. We do have in our midst our national parliamentarians, the media, all. Good afternoon. It's such a lovely sunny evening, and I am, of course, happy to be right here at the MacDonald College, and we are about to witness the sitting of the St. Patrick Parish Parliament. It's long awaited, and yet we are here to witness this day. This is the second leg of sitting for 2019. Just a few weeks ago, we hosted St. Andrew's, and it was, of course, a success. The Parish Parliament serves to give young people an opportunity in a pseudo parliament sitting, and that will encourage them to reach their fullest potential. Right? So I want to thank you all for being here, and I do hope that we do have a wonderful and a productive afternoon. At this time, let us all stand. And I will call on the DJ to just play our national anthem. And let us all stand at attention. Thank you. You can have your seats. Okay, just some in-house information. This event is brought to you live by Mikey Live and Mr. Kenroy Batiste. Also, I would like you to turn off your phones or put it on silent or vibrate. And these are some house rules. No standing, uh, no loud talking, and we do want everyone's attention. So thank you and enjoy the rest of the occasion.
Just tuning into the broadcast, you are part of live coverage, St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament. Very shortly, very shortly, we'll see the entry of the entrance of the parliamentarians. There you go. They're entering the chambers. And of course, they will take up their respective seats, and we will see the start of Parliament, quite literally. Parliamentary proceedings will get on the way. They are here to debate the resolution, be it resolved that the Youth Parliament of the Parish of St. Patrick urges the Government of Grenada to immediately establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposals. We wait with bated breath, I have to say, to the debate this afternoon on this very important subject. And of course, we look forward to the recommendations, the ideas being put forward. We also want to let you know that the Speaker of the House this afternoon, Mr. Dishon Edwards, or Dishon Edwards,
Pray be seated. I am advised by proclamation that the First Parish Youth Parliament of St. Patrick's Parliamentarians, duly appointed, should meet and transact their business on this 10th day of July 2019. I am further advised by proclamation that the affairs of this youth parliament will be conducted with wisdom, temper, and prudence, and that upon all occasions the rights of all citizens and members will be recognized and respected.
Honorable members, I am not unmindful of the honor which you have conferred on me today in electing me to this highest office, that of your Speaker and your servant. It will be my aim and duty to uphold the principles and traditions of this House and secure for each member the right to express his or her opinions within the limits necessary to preserve the decorum of this House. I pledge to recognize the rights and privileges of the honorable members and the House itself. I wish also to assure you that I will preside in a manner which will facilitate the transaction of debate in an orderly manner, and above all, I will seek to be fair and impartial in the decisions the rules of Parliament and yourself entrust to me. Let us pray. Guide, we beseech thee, Almighty God, members of this honorable House, that they may wisely deliberate for the good of this country and for the glory of thy holy name. Please join with me as we say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, pray be seated. This honorable House is now in session.
Confirmation of minutes. Announcements by Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, let me now remind you of some key rules governing the sitting of this House. Be mindful of these rules and other standing orders as we proceed into today's sitting. Rule number 1. Members must rise to speak only when recognized or called upon by the Speaker. Only the person so recognized is entitled to speak. Members must stand to speak and must speak to the House through the Speaker. All debates must be relevant to the question before the House. The Speaker may terminate a member's speech if, in the opinion of the Speaker, the person speaking is in violation of the decorum and dignity of the House. Members may not refer to the specific matters awaiting judicial decision. Members may not refer offensively to the Sovereign or Governor General. Matters referred to in the above two rules are subject always to the Speaker's discretion. Members may not use offensive language in debates. Members must not refer to other members by name, but must always refer to their position. Whenever the Speaker stands, members must be seated. When a member is speaking, no other member shall interrupt him or her except to raise a point of order or a question of privilege. Speeches shall not be read. Members may, however, refer to their notes. No member shall speak twice on a motion.
Resolutions.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to move for the adoption of the following motion standing in my name. Whereas health care in Grenada is a public good which should be equitably accessed by all citizens, and whereas the government has a responsibility to provide quality health care services to all citizens, regardless of their economic situation, with the aim of improving the health of the people of the state of Grenada. And whereas the current model of health financing through tax revenue is unsustainable, and the government is therefore committed to finding alternative means of financing healthcare. And whereas government has assessed these alternatives and proposes to fulfill this commitment through a national health insurance program. And whereas the youth parliamentarians of the parish of St. Patrick have considered the proposals for this national health program and deemed it to be an appropriate mechanism for sustainable financing for Grenada's public health sector. Be it resolved that the Youth Parliament of the Parish of St. Patrick urges the government of Grenada to immediately establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposals.
Members, the question proposed is that the Youth Parliament of the Parish of St. Patrick's urges the government of Grenada to immediately establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposals. Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, anyone that makes up his or her mind to get involved in politics and to run for office must love people. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, must love people. Mr. Speaker, I said this to say that this resolution will shine the light on the members of this honorable house and bring to light where their heart truly lies. Is their heart for the people or just for the personal gains? Mr. Speaker, happy am I to say that I want the light to shine on me, because I am here for the people. They are within my heart. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I stand firmly unshaken and urges the government of Grenada to immediately establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposal. Mr. Speaker, I support it 100%. National health insurance is dear to my heart, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you must have love for people to support such great initiative. Mr. Speaker, I am excited. I am optimistic about the path that our country is on at this time, moving towards the establishment of the National Health Insurance Program. Mr. Speaker, one may ask, why now? The answer is simple. Mr. Speaker, very simple. The time for procrastination is over. Hence the reason why. Mr. Speaker, I must express my disappointment with the failure of the opposition who was in office to make a bold step to establish the NHI. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, nevertheless, a step forward is way better than making no step at all. We are going to make a step forward, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I remain resolute in my opinion that the establishment of the National Health Insurance is right for us, and the time is also right. That said, Mr. Speaker, the current health system is financed through tax revenue, which is unsustainable. And this is no secret, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, government has to move with a sense of urgency to curb the problems, Mr. Speaker. As proposed, Mr. Speaker, this can be achieved through the National Health Insurance. The health economic, permission to quote, Mr. Speaker.
Permission granted.
The health economic unit in the University of West Indies St. Augustine campus provides the technical assistance to develop the framework for the NHI. Mr. Speaker, what we have received includes the proposal and basket of services to be covered under the NHI. Mr. Speaker, one may ask about the funding. I will propose a few. Mr. Speaker, the scope of funding of the NHI: 1, employee-employer share 6%, qualifying compensation to up to $6,700 per month, self-employed paid $200 per month, no income disclosed, or $175 or $100 with income disclosed. Pensioners, 2% of the pension benefit. Mr. Speaker, I beg for 1 minute.
You have 1 minute.
NHI funding, we will set up the NHI fund, treatment abroad program, and that is for persons within the diaspora who are willing to contribute. And we are looking to raise approximately $10.5 million there through the Fund Treatment Abroad program. Mr. Speaker, I want to end like this. We want a healthcare system that is designed not for profit from one's illness, but to be the reason they are alive. That's what we want at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, health is a must. It's a right, and it is widely accepted in the international principles. And I want this point to resonate in this house. Healthcare is a human right, and it is widely accepted in the international principles.
Is anyone standing to second the motion? Honorable Member for Lower Latas.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion. Mr. Speaker, we are not here for games, and we are certainly not here to play hide and seek. The word is out, Mr. Speaker, that we, the youth parliamentarians of the Parish of St. Patrick, deem the National Health Insurance Program an appropriate mechanism. It's out, Mr. Speaker. Some may say it is one of many. I agree. As a matter of fact, my team and I fully agree, Mr. Speaker. But are the other mechanisms appropriate? Are they really, Mr. Speaker? Certainly not. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, and permit me to quote, please, Mr. Speaker,
Permission granted.
and I quote, appropriate means to set apart for or to assign to a particular purpose or use, end of quote. This therefore gratifies this proposing team to unanimously support this resolution. The public healthcare system is not at the stage that would make universal healthcare possible, Mr. Speaker. The introduction of the National Health Insurance is a rational move. Mr. Speaker, as defined by the National Health Insurance Secretariat, and permit me to quote, please, Mr. Speaker,
Permission granted.
and I quote, the National Health Insurance Program is a compulsory health financing program that provides access to healthcare services to Grenadians, end of quote. Everyone would have access to the needed basket of services, Mr. Speaker. Some of these include basic oral health care, eye care, laboratory services, physician visits, primary health care, mental health, home visits for persons who are bedridden, pharmaceuticals, and limited overseas care. However, Mr. Speaker, these basket of services mentioned are only basic. Mr. Speaker, if we want sustainability, we cannot start large with the basket of services under the National Health Insurance Program. As the program grows, Mr. Speaker, we can allow the expansion of these basket of services. The Ministry of Health and the National Health Insurance must work hand in hand to provide quality healthcare services, Mr. Speaker. This suggests that the public hospitals and clinics must be at a high standard, Mr. Speaker. High standard. According to the National Health Insurance Secretariat, the suggested funding for the National Health Insurance Program are government contributions, which can cover contributions from citizens outside of Grenada, or through Grenada citizenship by investment, where we can boast of having one of the Caribbean's most exclusive and rewarding citizenship programs. Also, broad-based taxes, employer or employee contributions, and co-payments. The National Health Insurance will promote equity to ensure that all Grenadians have access to affordable, quality healthcare services regardless of their socio-economic status. This will entail major changes in the service, Mr. Speaker, total transformation of the healthcare service provision, and total overhaul of the entire healthcare system. Immediacy is the right action, Mr. Speaker. The longer we wait, the longer we are without quality healthcare. Mr. Speaker, a proper healthcare system can boost our health tourism, where more doctors will come into our country. Since we are not piloting the National Health Insurance, the opposition may have it stirring in their minds that we are only following a trend. If that is the case, we are here to inform you, the opposition, that the government is unsatisfied with our healthcare system and is determined, Mr. Speaker, determined to provide proper healthcare services to our people. Therefore, the government continues to look at various countries who have introduced or implemented the National Health Insurance Program, not to adopt the design of the National Health Insurance, but to find sustainable means of adapting to structures that can benefit our tri-island state, Mr. Speaker. It's no lie that the National Health Insurance Program has faced criticism since it was introduced. The Grenadian population must come to the realization that the government is responsible for providing for the good of the people, Mr. Speaker. They must further realize that an appointed government
is there to provide rules and regulations, Mr. Speaker, that we as a people must abide by. Also, Mr. Speaker, since we are in the hurricane season, we encourage everyone to be prepared. Why? Because during, Mr. Speaker, permit me 1 minute to wrap up, please.
And remember, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. Why? Because during the hurricane season, we experience more intense or extreme weather conditions. Hurricanes have great impacts on human health, Mr. Speaker, be it minor injuries or even major ones too. But we cannot be daunted, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to say that my colleagues and I are not daunted because the National Health Insurance is here to benefit our people, Mr. Speaker, our people. And I must draw it to your attention that we are starting registration soon. So we urge everyone to be on the lookout. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there any further contributions to the motion? Honorable Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As members of the opposition, we agree and we believe that the government has a mandate to provide quality health services to all citizens. As the Prime Minister outlined in his 2019 budget presentation, to have quality health care, if I may quote Mr. Speaker,
Granted.
and I quote, we must have adequate equipment to provide appropriate care, medication must be available, a proper management system must be in place, and healthcare workers must demonstrate a good attitude and be compassionate with patients, end quote. In other words, the government of this tri-island state has a decree, a charge, a patriotic duty, not just to provide access to the nation's citizens for needed health services, but to ensure that these services are proper and they provide a favorable outcome. We, the opposition, were hopeful that the members of the other side would share our belief, but from what is presented before us here, Mr. Speaker, we have to conclude that they have different ideas. You see, if the members were looking at the situation, how it really was, they would be singing a different tune this afternoon. As no one, Mr. Speaker, no one would agree that the provision of quality health care would allow multiple mothers to lose their newborns, Mr. Speaker, after months of preparation. And Mr. Speaker, it hurts my heart. But no one would agree that the provision of quality care would mean sharing an oxygen tank in the hospital with other patients when you're struggling to breathe with pneumonia, Mr. Speaker. These are just stories from members of my constituency of Lower Hermitage, Mr. Speaker. And if this is the high standard of health care that the members are speaking about, then I am afraid for our nation, Mr. Speaker. At this moment, I am also filled with sympathy for the members of the other side, because it seems they have been far removed from the plight of the Grenadian people. You see, Mr. Speaker, it seems as they have just been awakened from a slumber. And as they have awakened, they are helter-skelter in search for solutions to the mountain of piling issues. And Mr. Speaker, after they came from this wild goose chase, they have presented to us the National Health Insurance. However, Mr. Speaker, it seems as the members still have sleep in their eyes, because the members are claiming that the National Health Insurance will fulfill their mandate to provide quality health care to the nation's citizens. Mr. Speaker, that is such an erroneous claim. The National Health Insurance, according to the National Health Insurance Secretariat, would provide access to the current services provided by our hospitals and other healthcare providers, Mr. Speaker. And I would rather compare the National Health Insurance to a revolving glass. On one side of the door are Grenadians. Looking through the door, we can see the lack of resources, the poor infrastructure,
the outdated equipment, the lengthy wait times, the newborn mortality rate, the nurses that are overworked, and the doctors that are underpaid, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all the NHI will allow is for us Grenadians to access that all. It is very clear then, Mr. Speaker, if I may have 1 minute to wrap up my speech. No, that's the first bill. Oh, sorry. It is then very clear, Mr. Speaker, our primary focus should be on providing valuable health care, not access to poor quality health care. Or as my mother would say, if I may quote her, Mr. Speaker,
You may.
not any peck-a-mel or any whole thing, unquote. Take, for instance, Mr. Speaker, the country of Belize. Before seeking to implement their universal national health insurance, they took a 3-pronged approach to total health reformation. According to Ruth Jamilo, Health Services Manager at the NHI in Belize, this approach included 1, the decentralization of health services, 2, the strengthening of infrastructure and the delivery of health care, and 3, Mr. Speaker, establishing a national health insurance fund. So you see this? This is the kind of, if I may have 30 seconds just to wrap up, Mr. Speaker.
You may.
This is the kind of holistic approach we need, Mr. Speaker. This will allow the government to really fulfill their mandate to the Grenadian people. As I close, I would like to implore the members of the other side through you to consider this for one moment. Do we need a revolving door? Or do we need a well-functioning escalator that will give us the progressive improvements that we really deserve in healthcare? I thank you.
Are there any further contributions to the motion? Honorable Member for Sitters.
Mr. Speaker, according to the World Health Organization, in 2017, more than half the world's population cannot obtain the necessary health care, and large numbers of households are being pushed into poverty as a result of having to pay for health care out of their pockets. Mr. Speaker, if this isn't troubling enough, let me bring it home. 56% of the Grenadian population are paying for health care out of their own pockets. Mr. Speaker, 56%. Keep in mind, Mr. Speaker, that the unemployment rate of Grenada was 24% in 2017. That's just a quarter of our population. So, Mr. Speaker, let us internalize this a bit. More than half our population is paying out of pocket for health care. Yet quarter of that same population is unemployed. Mr. Speaker, it is clear as day that we have a problem here. We ourselves, being employed citizens of Grenada, we understand how hard it is to pay for health care, how much more difficult it is for someone who's unemployed. Mr. Speaker, permit me to share a story with you. Mr. Speaker, while I was perusing the internet one day last week, I came across a story on the South China Morning Post. That story was even featured on BBC. And Mr. Speaker, the story was about a family of 3. And all 3 members, they were very ill. They didn't have the finances to pay, Mr. Speaker, for medical care. So the father in that family, he decided that he was going to sacrifice. Mr. Speaker, he sacrificed his health so that his wife and his daughter may have an opportunity at medical care. Mr. Speaker, after reading this story, it dawned on me. What if our families were placed in that situation? What if the families of Grenada were in that situation where they had to choose amongst themselves who would get medical care or life? Mr. Speaker, no family, whether their race or despite their social status, should ever have to make a decision like that. And if this is the state that the opposition is waiting for us to be in, we would ensure that does not happen. Because as a government, we understand that we are tasked with the responsibility to ensure that every Grenadian citizen is well taken care of in all aspects, including health. Mr. Speaker, as I continue, they say that when God can come, he does send. So maybe this is a sign from the heavens through the media houses to tell us that we need to do something about our health care. Mr. Speaker, as I continue, research done by the National Health Insurance Secretariat in late 2017 to 2018 found that only 7.4% of our population pay for private health insurance. A minute 7.4%. Mr. Speaker, and that 7.4% is made up of persons who work in business places such as the banks and other businesses that offer that sort of benefit. So, Mr. Speaker, where does that leave our elderly and our children, the most vulnerable of our people? Mr. Speaker, I'll be very honest with you. I thought the opposition would have been elated to join with us to establish the NHI and would be willing to work with us to ensure that it is successful. But no, Mr. Speaker, it isn't so. I guess they have their private health insurance and they're well secured. But Mr. Speaker, what about the little people? What about the little people of Grenada? This is who we should be concerned with. Mr. Speaker, has the opposition leader forgotten that we sat down to deem NHI the most appropriate method? Maybe she needs health care, Mr. Speaker, because she seems to be forgetting. Mr. Speaker, NHI is here for everyone and anyone, regardless of your race, status, or age. And Mr. Speaker, we would ensure, as a government, we would ensure that everyone's health is secure. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge you to side with us on this resolution to establish the national health insurance. I thank you.
Are there any other contributions to the debate on this resolution? Honorable Member for Pointsfield.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, members of this honorable House, I rise on behalf of the opposition to show how the proposed options of financing the National Health Insurance, NHI, would increase the social burden and not help to end extreme poverty, as the theme of this initiative presented in the IBSA concept notes suggest. I stand firm with the honorable members on this side. I cannot support this resolution with the proposal in this current state. Mr. Speaker, I remember a story I learned a long time ago about a fisherman and a mermaid. They were in love, you see, and one day she asked him to join her and come live with her on beneath the ocean. Mr. Speaker, he gave the mermaid a wicker basket, just like this one, appealing to the eyes, but filled with so many holes. And he told her to empty the ocean before he could come to live with her. Mr. Speaker, this story is relevant because although this theme is noble, especially since the UNDP assigned this country the highest rate of extreme poverty rates in the Caribbean in 2018, I fear that the urgency of the government to implement this program will leave us like this mermaid, trying to use a wicker basket to empty a sea of poverty. Mr. Speaker, according to Maytone's song, money is the answer to anything you need these days. And anywhere you go, it's the same cry, even in my constituency. Money worries, Mr. Speaker. Money problems. So how will the NHI be funded? Mr. Speaker, during a General Council meeting at the Boca Secondary School on May 26, 2019, the Honorable Minister with responsibility for health announced and answered the question with possibilities. The first proposal, 2% increase in VAT from 15% to 17%. The Honorable Minister said that this 2% will go directly towards healthcare. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that this will have a negative effect on the vulnerable population because this will result in an increase in the cost of living. In other words, increased taxes will reduce the available disposable income of families. It will negatively affect the ability of the poor to afford food and to save. Mr. Speaker, you know that too. Secondly, the minister proposed payroll taxation. Mr. Speaker, this method mandates that healthcare deductions be made in addition to NIS deductions from salaries. Mr. Speaker, since there is no fiscal space for increase in salaries, we will have less money to take home to our families. Mr. Speaker, this will increase in the number of working poor. Mr. Speaker, I foresee that this will lead to an increase in mental health and physical health problems, increasing the demand on healthcare services on one hand and increasing the reliance on social programs. Mr. Speaker, and this leaves yet another question. What will happen to the unemployed? What will happen to the retired? Who would cover their health care? Who would pay for this? Mr. Speaker, our ambition to develop a national health care in Grenada is commendable, but I am afraid that the proposed options for financing this initiative would increase social burden. So instead, Mr. Speaker, I propose that we find the right mix of fiscal instruments which are multi-source and equitable. The government introduced this action, that the government introduced action to manage demand and, Mr. Speaker, can you kindly permit me 60 seconds to wrap up my presentation?
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. That the government introduced actions to manage demand and contain costs and improve efficiency of what we have instead of just looking for means of increasing the health budget. Another member will elaborate on this, Mr. Speaker, but I beg that you be considerate and give us our submissions as we seek to fill the resource gaps of this weaker basket of health services. I thank you.
Are there any other members wishing to contribute to this debate? Honorable Member for Upper Latast.
Pleasant evening to all. Mr. Speaker, please permit me to quote.
Permission granted.
The mission statement of the Ministry of Health is, and I quote, to promote and provide health services that are appropriate, accessible, equitable, and sustainable, utilizing suitably qualified and motivated staff committed to excellence and professionalism, end of quote. Mr. Speaker, with that in mind, I stand firmly with my fellow colleagues in full support of the resolution before us this evening. Mr. Speaker, I know the opposition have been heavily stressing on why the government is uptaking the national health insurance instead of focusing on improving our health system. Well, Mr. Speaker, I am more than happy to inform them that the Ministry of Health will be working hand in hand with the National Health Insurance Secretariat, along with the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Social Services, the National Insurance Scheme, and private health insurance companies, not only to ensure that our health care is accessible, affordable, and equitable, but also to ensure that it is of quality. Mr. Speaker, one of my colleagues conducted an interview with a representative from the National Health Insurance Secretariat. In the interview, the representative gave a breakdown of specifically what the basket of services entailed, as was outlined by our Minister of Information. She also pointed out that they will be very basic. So for example, they will provide eye care, but not eye surgery. But have no fear, Mr. Speaker, because this is where the Ministry of Health comes in. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health will partner with countries such as Cuba and medical institutes such as St. George's University, which will help to relieve the cost of some of these surgeries for persons that are enrolled in the National Health Insurance Program. Mr. Speaker, doesn't that sound like exactly what our sweet Grenada needs? Mr. Speaker, you know babies are fed in stages. They start off only on their mother's breast milk, then they move to juices and porridges, then onto soft foods until they are able to eat what we as adults eat. Mr. Speaker, just the same way the National Health Insurance will be rolled out in phases. Mr. Speaker, phase 1 will consist of primary care services, labs, imaging, and pharmaceuticals. Phase 2 will consist of referred specialist care, oral health care, mental health outpatient services, and in phase 3, we will have secondary care included. Mr. Speaker, my honorable colleague just gave a very touching story which left me thinking, what if, Mr. Speaker, it was me or you that had to sacrifice our lives so our family can remain alive, just because there is no system in place to make our health care affordable? Wouldn't that be just tragic, Mr. Speaker? Our current healthcare system is not as effective as it would be if national health insurance if we had national health insurance. Sorry. Mr. Speaker, yes, there is free doctor attendance at our public health clinics, and there is subsidized prices on our medication at our government pharmacies. But, Mr. Speaker, this is as far as it goes. And this is not enough to sustain a healthy nation. As the old saying goes, a healthy nation is a wealthy nation. Mr. Speaker, as I close, I would like to bless this honorable House with some words from the Book of Life. Mr. Speaker, please permit me to quote part of Revelation chapter 3, verse 18.
Permission granted.
And I quote, "Anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see." End of quote. So, Mr. Speaker, I am willingly offering the opposition some of these eye salves to open up their eyes so that they can see. Mr. Speaker, please permit me 30 seconds. Finish message.
Permission granted.
So that they can open up their eyes and see that the national health insurance is what our country desperately needs on our move to securing our health today, tomorrow, and forever. I thank you.
Honorable Member for Snell.
Mr. Speaker, before I begin my presentation, prudence demands that I respond to the honorable member, Mr. Speaker. While they think that we are blind, it is quite clear and obvious that they cannot process what they see. Mr. Speaker, I stand here both concerned and amused. The honorable member for Soteres gave such a touching story about the Chinese family. But doesn't she know, Mr. Speaker, about the state of healthcare in Grenada? That at the Soteres medical station, there wasn't any ambulance for weeks, Mr. Speaker. And that when they finally received one, nurses fainted at the back of it. Doesn't she know, Mr. Speaker, that at night the health center is basically unstaffed? Mr. Speaker, since the honorable members tend to lack the processing capability, let me break it down for you. Even if the Chinese father was to commit
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order.
please state your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, is the honorable member insulting our intelligence? I really would like to know.
Honorable member for Snellhall, please be careful with the words that you use when referring to the team on the other side of the House.
Mr. Speaker, if I would have insulted the honorable member in any way, I sincerely apologize. But I am merely interpreting what the members would have said, Mr. Speaker. And to us over here, it clearly lacks thought. As I was saying, Mr. Speaker, if the Chinese gentleman was to sacrifice himself, both his wife and his child would still end up dying in our current state of it. The government clearly hasn't heard the phrase, Mr. Speaker, hoary bird cannot build good nest. I am amazed and shocked at the level of oversight and ignorance that has been demonstrated during the drafting of this bill, Mr. Speaker. I am referring specifically to the proposed methods of funding for the NHI. These methods, Mr. Speaker, include mandatory contributions and an increase in VAT from 15 to 17%. Now, Mr. Speaker, after careful examination, we, the opposition, have declared these methods to be financially unsustainable. And why, Mr. Speaker? Allow me to explain. I will, Mr. Speaker, take my time so that everyone here can understand. Let us start with mandatory contributions. In theory, Mr. Speaker, and I stress the word theory, this system works by taking a certain amount of money from every, and I stress the word every, from every working Grenadian. We are all acquainted with this mechanism as NIS uses it to collect their contribution. Now the problem, Mr. Speaker, we discovered after conducting a brief survey that the vast majority of bus operators, small farmers, auto mechanic, and shop owners do not make any contributions to the NIS. Those persons number in the thousands, Mr. Speaker. Imagine thousands of working Grenadians not contributing to the NHI. Because if they are not persuaded to contribute to the NIS, I would like to know, Mr. Speaker, what force or mechanism would force them to contribute towards the NHI? I would also like to know, Mr. Speaker, would the brunt of the cost simply fall back onto the other working persons, the minority of the working class? I would like to know, Mr. Speaker, as such a thought is indescribable and unbearable. Mr. Speaker, with this fact in mind, we, the opposition, propose that the government, before implementing the NHI, first develop a mechanism to ensure that every working Grenadian pays their fair share. The second proposed method of funding, Mr. Speaker, an increase in VAT. In the wake of a structural adjustment program, Mr. Speaker, and an increase in our NIS contributions, coupled with the NHI contributions, the government still wants to bleed us dry and tax us into poverty. We do not, Mr. Speaker, and cannot support in any way an increase in VAT. However, we understand that the NHI must be funded, and so we recommend, Mr. Speaker, that the government introduce a different kind of tax. Allow me to explain. A tax, Mr. Speaker, on the so-called demerit goods, such as sodas, alcohol, tobacco, and tobacco products, Mr. Speaker. Countless studies would have proven that consuming one or any combination Permit me 1 minute more, Mr. Speaker.
You have 1 minute more.
Countless studies would have proven, Mr. Speaker, that consuming any one or a combination of these products can lead to severe health implications and health diseases such as lung cancer, kidney disease, liver disease, diabetes, and heart disease, Mr. Speaker. It is therefore prudent that the individuals consuming these products pay for the NHI while they are consuming it and enjoying themselves. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I would like for the government to tell us. Let us imagine while the NHI is in operation, I go to a public health center owned and operated by government. The government bill the NHI for my service. Where does the money go, Mr. Speaker? Who gets it? What would it be used for? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there any further contributions to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Honourable
it
member,
seems-
kindly wait until you are acknowledged before addressing this House. Member for Batway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it seems that the honourable member has not been listening because the honourable member before me clearly showed how the national health insurance will be improved. We are saying it is not fixed, but one step at a time, our present healthcare system will be better. Mr. Speaker, I stand here this afternoon in full solidarity with my colleagues as we support this resolution 100%. Mr. Speaker, do not get me wrong. We are not saying that our present healthcare system is 100% perfect. But Mr. Speaker, we as the government, we have a caring and concerned heart for our people and their health. Hence the reason we are here to endorse the establishment of the National Health Insurance. Mr. Speaker, let us educate our people some more on the purpose of the National Health Insurance and the benefit that can be driven from it. Mr. Speaker, as I sit here for the longest while and listen to the members of the opposition make their presentation, Mr. Speaker, sorry to say I am very worried. Mr. Speaker, but I am not daunted because we, the government, know for a fact that this is something good for our little Grenada. Mr. Speaker, we, the government, ask ourselves, is the opposition truly concerned about our people of this country and their health? Mr. Speaker, it leaves one to wonder. Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue our panel discussion drive to ensure that information fully understood by all citizens. Leave no stone unturned, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we will also organize posters, shingles, drum, and speech competition for school children to get them involved in the process. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, national health insurance will eventually be added to the school-based assessment for secondary schools as a means of taking part of the national health insurance. Mr. Speaker, in mind, well, let's educate our people on the national health insurance so that they'll be able to take full advantage of the opportunity available. Mr. Speaker, we are not too old, we are not too young. Mr. Speaker, let us educate the people on the purpose of the healthcare system, especially the national health insurance. Mr. Speaker, all we want to do is to protect our people of Grenada of a better healthcare system in securing them for the future. Mr. Speaker, let us take a page from our sister country, the Bahamas. After a live stream with one of the members of the National Health Insurance Secretariat, presently Bahamas have 40,000 persons enrolled in the National Health Insurance. Mr. Speaker, That speaks of a caring government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, note this, they have already made a big headway with the national health insurance. Mr. Speaker, we, the government, are also willing to visit Caribbean countries where they have already implemented the national health insurance and it is working pretty well, so that we could be able to adopt the structure and better our healthcare system here in Grenada. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude through you, I would like to charge my fellow members of the opposition to please stand with us on this resolution, because all we, the government, want is a healthcare system that is designed not to profit for one illness, but to be the reason they are alive. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there any further contributions to the motion? Honorable Member for Mount Craven.
Mr. Speaker, it is with great pride and joy I stand before you here today to present on a topic that affects all Grenadians. As we carefully analyze this resolution, my colleagues and I are asking the question, why rush? Mr. Speaker, permit me to start with an old saying.
Permission granted.
And I quote, "A hurry bird never build a good nest," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, health is an integral part of our lives, and every Grenadian is affected in some way or the other. Mr. Speaker, the lack of proper health leads to death, by which sadly many of us are affected today. That is why, with humble hearts, I urge a member on the government side not to rush into something such as health that will affect our lives greatly. Mr. Speaker, the proposal states, permission to quote,
Granted.
and I quote, "The National Insurance Board is the entity that will be responsible for the National Health Insurance Program," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, is this organization doing such a great job with the NIS that we should give them such a great responsibility? Mr. Speaker, I'm not here to question the credibility of the NIS. However, can the NIS successfully run the National Health Insurance Services Program with a current struggle with bankruptcy, therefore having to increase the contribution at retirement age? Mr. Speaker, the resolution also states, permission to quote,
Granted.
and I quote, "Government has assessed these alternatives," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, what are choices that the Grenadian had to choose from? Is democracy demonstrated here? Are we given the opportunity to choose on a matter that is between life and death? Mr. Speaker, can I further quote?
You may.
All right, and I quote, "Deem it to be an appropriate mechanism for sustainable financing for the Grenada public health sector," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, it may be a source of funding for the government, but is it the most appropriate mechanism for safeguarding and sustaining the health of our Grenadian people? Mr. Speaker,
Are the Grenadian people schemed? Or is this a fair deal? We may never know until the alternatives have been shown to the Grenadian people and proven futile. Mr. Speaker, this resolution has left us on opposition side with many unanswered questions. And it is with heavy hearts that we reject this proposed resolution. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude today with heavy heart and sadness of my heart over the death toll of being affected by our healthcare system today, I leave with this old saying. Can you permit me to quote for the final time, Mr. Speaker?
Permission granted.
And I quote, "The race is not for the fastest, but those that endure to the end." End of quote. Mr. Speaker, I urge the government to let's take our time, meet with the people, work on our healthcare system, and then, and only then, we can settle on a carefully analyzed health program that will benefit all Grenadians. I thank you.
Any further contributions to the motion? Honorable Member for High Street.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Without health insurance, getting sick or injured could mean going bankrupt, going without needed care, or even dying endlessly. This is according to United States Congresswoman Jan Skakowski. Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. This is a sad tune that will be hummed by Grenadians who will continue to feel the pressure that inaccessibility to an inequitable distribution of health care in the absence of the national health insurance. It's as if we're dying, Mr. Speaker, and we are about to meet our maker. Mr. Speaker, we are not just endorsing equality, but equity in the national health insurance. Let's liken equity and equality to some plants. All plants collect the same supply of sunlight despite need. Here we have equality. Each plant receives the supply of sunlight it needs to thrive. Here we have equity. According to the World Health Organization, and I quote, equity is the absence of avoidable or remediable differences among groups of people, whether these groups are defined socially, economically, demographically. The World Health Organization highlights the fact that health equities involve more than a lack of equal access to needed human resources. They entail a failure to avoid or overcome inequalities that infringe on fairness and human rights norms. End of quote. Mr. Speaker, the national health insurance would give people who cannot afford health care the services that they need. The part that moves me the most, Mr. Speaker, it thrills my heart to speak about this, Mr. Speaker, is that it allows basic health care for all citizens.
Member for Snell.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
Right, Mr. Speaker, I'm a bit confused. The honorable member seems to be purporting that with the introduction of the NHI, our mortality rate in Grenada here is going to decrease. I would like for the honorable member to tell us, is the NHI going to change the way we operate, as in the services provided at the medical centers, the quality of training for the professionals, the attitude towards the patients?
Member for High Street, can you please comment?
Mr. Speaker, if the honorable member was listening to my previous colleagues' arguments, they stated that we will work hand in hand with the Ministry of Finance, NIS, and all the other ministries. Of course, we are going to develop and improve the quality of healthcare service in Grenada. Mr. Speaker, may I continue?
You may.
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, the part that moved me the most, I was so moved by this part, Mr. Speaker, that I didn't realize the honorable member was interrupting me. Mr. Speaker, the part that moved me the most is that it allows basic health care for all citizens, Mr. Speaker. And the National Health Insurance does not discriminate against anyone. In addition, every Grenadian would be able to access health care no matter his social status. Mr. Speaker, since no human life is greater than another, the poor can be able to receive exactly the type of health care that could only be afforded by the rich under normal circumstances. Isn't that something great? Securing your health today, tomorrow, forever with the National Health Insurance. While the fear of change, the one thing that is constant in this lifetime, has our opponents staggering and flustered, we, the government, know and understand that the National Health Insurance, the health care of all people, will be better. Mr. Speaker, it will cause to ring the sweet sound of a new tune. No, not nearer my God to thee, but the joyful sound of it is well with...
Honorable Opposition Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize. I have to interrupt the members singing, but I don't think I got the clarity that we seek. So I am going to ask the question.
Honorable Member, why are you standing?
I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state that point.
I am going to ask the question in another way so that we can get our clarity. Why is it the NHI needs to be introduced before the government takes an interest into improving our healthcare? Why do we need the NHI first before they take an interest into the health of the Grenadian?
Honorable Member for High Street, can you kindly respond to the question asked?
Mr. Speaker, we always have an interest and we always will have an interest. I would like the honorable member to listen to my colleagues and will further reiterate and further answer your question and give you the information that you need to clarify this misconception in your mind. And at the end of this, I'm sure you will come on this side and agree with us here today. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, can I continue? Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, it will cause us to ring the sweet sound of a new tune. No, not nearer my God to thee, but as I was in the midst of singing my joyful song, it is well with my soul. Mr. Speaker, this song will peel out from the lips of those who were once challenged financially to enjoy equitable access to health care made possible by the National Health Insurance. And Mr. Speaker, we as this government are sure and we are in firm agreement to this resolution here today. I thank you.
Are there any further contributions to the motion? Honorable Member for Lower Mali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A pleasant good afternoon to all. This afternoon, I stand unwavering in solidarity with the members of the opposition in opposing the moot put forward. Mr. Speaker, the first part of the resolution, permission to quote?
Permission granted.
And states, and I quote, whereas healthcare in Grenada is a public good which should be equitably accessed by all citizens, end of quote. Mr. Speaker, There seems to be some confusion with the terms equitable and equal. Hence, I see it essential to define these terms to provide clarity. According to Cambridge Dictionary, equitable means treating everyone fairly and in the same way, while equal means the same amount, number, or size. Mr. Speaker, it seems, therefore, that the government's use of the term in regards to the national health insurance has been incorrect. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know, are financial contributions going to be made by every citizen? Is it equitable for a small portion of the population to be bearing the burdens of financing the entire population? How is it equitable for some people to be paying significantly more for the same service? While the national health insurance will make healthcare accessible, it does not ensure availability, Mr. Speaker. Citizens will be given an opportunity to access something that may not even exist. Mr. Speaker, let's say, for instance, I come down with probably cancer. Wouldn't I require something like chemotherapy? And if chemotherapy isn't available here, I wouldn't get it. They may provide a referral to a foreign country. But if I couldn't pay for the services provided here, how would I be able to afford a plane ticket and accommodations to seek this healthcare abroad, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, this is an image that is used in presentations by National Health Insurance Secretariat to sensitize persons. It is supposed to be showing how it would be equitable. It is clearly showing that you would be taken from the more fortunate and given to other people. Mr. Speaker, how is this equitable? How is it fair to be taken from some and just given to others? Would it be fair to these people that you're taken from? In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, it is only logical to infer the proposal on the table undermines fairness of the ongoing. It is logical to infer, therefore, that the proposal on the table undermines fairness from the ongo, going against what it claims to secure. How ironic, Mr. Speaker. There is a dire need for the government to stop and seriously consider, Mr. Speaker, a more practical approach to local health care. Mr. Speaker, there is a dire need for the government to stop and consider a healthcare initiative that is equitable in the true sense of the word, and stop trying to play Robin Hood, stealing from the rich and giving to the less fortunate.
Are there any further contributions to the motion? Honorable Member for Mongjime.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I start my presentation, is that the opposition, is like stick breaking the opposition ears, Mr. Speaker? Because they keep stressing on why we are not improving our healthcare system. But Mr. Speaker, we are presenting the NHI as a step towards improving our healthcare. Mr. Speaker, I stand here, Mr. Speaker, in full support of this resolution put forward today by this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, my heart is heavy, Mr. Speaker. My heart is heavy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members on the opposite side even members, my colleagues, members in the audience could quite agree with me, Mr. Speaker, that the healthcare system, Mr. Speaker, in Grenada is terrible. I quite agree with the opposition. Mr. Speaker, permit me to give a scenario to this Honorable House.
Granted.
Mr. Speaker, my child was sick, Mr. Speaker, with stomach problem. I brought her to Princess Alice Hospital, Mr. Speaker. We reached in Princess Alice Hospital 7:45 a.m., Mr. Speaker. We got attendance 8:05 p.m., Mr. Speaker. So I feel, I understand where the opposition coming from, that the healthcare system needs serious addressing, Mr. Speaker. That's why, Mr. Speaker, we, the government, see it fit, Mr. Speaker, to bring in the NHI to assist, to help curb this problem, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that we Grenadians, we don't like change, Mr. Speaker. I know that we hear about the NHI, and we know it's a change, it's a different area, Mr. Speaker, but sometimes a change might be good. I know we don't really like change, but change might be good sometimes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we all know that we are in the carnival season. We are in the festive season, Mr. Speaker, and plenty.
Honourable Member for Snellhall.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
State your point of clarity.
The Honourable Member just agreed, Mr. Speaker, that the state of healthcare in Grenada is quite terrible. Cognizant of the fact, Mr. Speaker, that the NHI, does not provide healthcare services per se, but only pays for it. Wouldn't the healthcare system remain the same even after the implementation of the NHI? I would like to know if the Honourable Member agrees to that as well, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honourable Member, can you please respond to the question asked?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member is very impatient, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, through you, I would like the Honourable Member, if he waits a little bit, he will listen and he will get the answer in the rest of my speech, Mr. Speaker. So I'm urging the member to please wait. Have a little bit of patience, Mr. Speaker. May I continue, Mr. Speaker?
You are going to respond to a question later on in your speech? Is that what you're saying? Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, we all know that we are in the carnival season, we are in the festive season, and we know that a lot of foreigners is coming into our lovely island, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how can we, the members of the government, Mr. Speaker, sit back, Mr. Speaker, and wait until the visitors come to experience, Mr. Speaker, this terrible healthcare, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we cannot, Mr. Speaker. If we allow that, Mr. Speaker, then it will be insanity to the highest degree, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we always say, Mr. Speaker, that our culture is dying. We're saying that our culture is seriously dying and that we need to bring back, we need to keep the culture alive in our country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how can we keep our culture alive, Mr. Speaker, when the older people, the elderly head, Mr. Speaker, is dying, Mr. Speaker? We know that the elderly folks, Mr. Speaker, they're not kind of encouraging us about our culture. They're kind of showing us, example, the folk dancing, Mr. Speaker. They're not kind of getting us involved with folk dancing, Mr. Speaker. So when they are dying, Mr. Speaker, that's why that whole the culture will die, Mr. Speaker. So that's why, Mr. Speaker, we as the government see it fit that we need to improve our healthcare system, Mr. Speaker. We need to improve our healthcare system. That's why, Mr. Speaker, we including the primary health care. The NHI will provide primary health care, Mr. Speaker. Primary health care 24 hours medical service in all our health centers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I close, Mr.
Honourable
Speaker.
member for Mount Jimmy, and there is someone else on the floor.
Mr. Speaker.
Member,
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
member for Pointsfield.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
Mr. Speaker, I am in solidarity with the honourable member. I know how it feels to be waiting for something and you're not certain that you will get it. But we sat here patiently and waited for methods as to how, responses as to how the NHI would improve healthcare. So, in your position, I would ask you, through Mr. Speaker, can you educate us as to how NHI will affect change in the current healthcare construct? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member, can you kindly respond to the question posed?
Mr. Speaker, through you, can I give way to the honourable member for Riverside, Minister of Health?
You may. Member for River Sally.
Mr. Speaker.
Sorry. Member for Upper Latas.
Mr. Speaker, to end the misery of the opposition and answer the question, as I clearly stated in my speech, we did an interview with the National Health Insurance Secretariat. And in the interview, the representative also stated that in order for parts of the NHI's plans and in order for it to work, the Ministry of Health has to improve the services in the hospitals and other health clinics. Mr. Speaker, this is why the NHI is not doing it on their own. They are partnering with other entities such as the Ministry of Health. I think this should answer the question.
Honourable member for Upper Latas. The question that was asked was how?
How?
And your response does not adequately answer the question.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if the opposition was listening, the Minister of Finance pointed out how we will fund the project. I also gave a solution. I said that the Ministry of Health will be partnering with other countries such as Cuba and medical institutes such as SU. This is how we will help to fix the health problem in Grenada.
Member for Mount Jimmy.
Mr. Speaker, as I close, we want a healthcare system that is designed not to profit from one's illness, but to be the reason why they are alive. Mr. Speaker, so I urge the members of the opposition side to please relook the resolution and join us, the government, in help to curb this problem. Mr. Speaker, I rest my case.
Are there any further contributions to the motion? Honourable member for Cedars.
A pleasant good afternoon to all. Mr. Speaker, imagine going to the medical health center with a gash several inches deep, only to have the attending nurse place a simple plaster on it. Outrageous, right? Well, Mr. Speaker, if we were to implement and establish the national health insurance as it is, with the proposed benefits, Mr. Speaker,
As exaggerated as the previous scenario may seem, this may be the situation then. The current benefit package includes personal preventative or screening services, oral care, prescription medicine, among others. While I commend its preventative nature, Mr. Speaker, as can be seen in the NHI Secretariat's stakeholders engagement document, Mr. Speaker, some of the primary causes of death in Grenada from 2008 to 2018 are as follows: cancer, hypertensive heart disease, kidney failure, Mr. Speaker, and among others. How then, Mr. Speaker, can someone who suffers from kidney disease, Mr. Speaker, how then can they, under the proposed NHI system, seek treatment, Mr. Speaker? How can someone on dialysis, Mr. Speaker, go to the NHI, something that they're mandated to contribute to? How then can they go to that to seek funding to continue dialysis, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I thought that this system, this proposed system, was non-discriminatory towards persons, Mr. Speaker. However, it seems as though it's only non-discriminatory towards how the money is obtained for funding. Taxes left, right, and center, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as if that wasn't bad enough already, charging people for mere basic services, things that are already available, Mr. Speaker. Something which, in my opinion, is the most embarrassing of it all, Mr. Speaker, taxation for visitors, Mr. Speaker. We want to tax the tourists coming into our country for the poor quality services that we offer, Mr. Speaker. Imagine coming from Germany, Mr. Speaker, having to pay a $10 or $15 tax, Mr. Speaker, going to the emergency room only to wait for 3 hours just for a mere cut on your foot, Mr. Speaker. This is outrageous, Mr. Speaker. We shouldn't even consider such a proposal, Mr. Speaker. We should instead, as the opposition leader stated, we should look into providing valuable health care, not access to the poor health care that we have, valuable health care, Mr.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
The honorable member mentioned that we are here to implement, but I want the honorable member to note that we are here to endorse the establishment of the NHI. And also, second point of clarity here, Mr. Speaker, she spoke of taxing the visitors, the tourists. It seems as though the honorable member haven't lived the islanders yet to go to other countries or probably had visited any of the health facilities outside of Grenada while doing her normal duties, what there could be for business-wise, and fell ill. Mr. Speaker, I traveled and fell ill. And I'm not covered under any health insurance in the US, and I had to pay for the services. I have to pay for the services as a tourist. So I wanted to take that in consideration. So nothing wrong with this. It happens in other country, and they come here, and some of them don't even come. They don't even have the health insurance as well. So nothing wrong with that.
Honorable member, kindly continue.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, before proceeding, I would just like to address the honorable member. Mr. Speaker, there is nothing wrong with taxing, there would be nothing wrong with taxing the tourists if the quality of healthcare that we offered was much better, Mr. Speaker. To tax them, Mr. Speaker, is like selling cattle back to the tourists, Mr. Speaker. We charging them money, and when they come expecting high quality, Mr. Speaker, we're not getting anything. At least, honorable member, when you travel to mentioned foreign country, I'm sure you didn't have a long wait time, and sure that quality of the healthcare you received was much better than what's provided here. Mr. Speaker, let us stop making empty promises, Mr. Speaker. SGU has been here for over 20 years, Mr. Speaker,
And what have been done, Mr. Speaker? The ministry have been providing scholarships for persons to do degrees left, right, and center, Mr. Speaker. And where are these persons going, Mr. Speaker? The argument today shouldn't even be on improving the current state of healthcare, Mr. Speaker. It shouldn't be on that. Mr. Speaker, I urge the members of government to reconsider today's resolution, Mr. Speaker. We cannot move forward with the immediate implementation of something as incomplete and flaw-ridden as the National Health Insurance proposals that were made, Mr. Speaker. It is not feasible and it is not adequate, Mr. Speaker. Remember, the wise man built his house upon the rock and the foolish man built his house on the sand. Who are we going to emulate? Are we going to be foolish or are we going to be wise?
Any further contributions to the motion? Honorable Member for Upper Hermitage.
My colleagues and I are here to fight for the health of our country by urging the government of Grenada to go forward with establishing a national health insurance program. Be not swayed by fiction, which may sometimes seem much more sensational than fact. The members of the opposition may try to convince you that the National Health Insurance, NHI, is not an appropriate mechanism for the sustainable financing of Grenada's public health services. But we are vigilant. For Noah also had to contend with non-believers when he warned them about the impending flood. He even provided an ark. The current model of health financing through tax revenue is the flood, Mr. Speaker, and the ark is a national health insurance. Fact, fact, fact. This is the basis upon which we build our argument, Mr. Speaker. The World Health Organization, Resolution 58.33 from 2005 says, everyone should be able to access health services and not be subject to financial hardship in doing so. Hence, the NHI is the miracle healthcare we have been looking for. It is coordinated in a manner that ensures that every eligible person has access to the benefits. The initiative is equitable. According to U.S. legal, and Mr. Speaker, permit me to quote.
Permission granted.
Equitable refers to something characterized by fairness, impartiality, or lack of bias, unquote. These characteristics of equitability epitomizes the NHI. It is constructed so that everyone, regardless of ethnicity, health issues, financial status, and age, can claim health care according to their individual needs. Mr. Speaker, no other alternative can better suit our country. Furthermore, discrimination will not be an issue once the NHI is fully launched. How? Mr. Speaker, permit me to quote a scenario.
Permission granted.
Perhaps Mr. John Doe made a claim to receive physiotherapy after breaking his hand. And perhaps he is denied for an invalid reason or even on the premises of bias. Mr. Speaker, a customer service or complaint desk will be formed, so Mr. Doe can request the necessary justice. His case will then be reviewed with advice from an impartial legal team. Then, the required rectifications will be made and Mr. John Doe can receive his claim. Equitability, Mr. Speaker. The NHI is engineered in such a manner that discrimination cannot germinate within the operation of the program. Receiving health benefits is without sacrificing other areas of life and without worry of regressing into poverty. Mr. Speaker, we no longer have to hold our pockets at ransom. The National Health Insurance will pay for our health debts. It is undeniable that unlike National Health Insurance, the current model of health financing is unsustainable. Mr. Speaker, the NHI is accessible to all Grenadians from the cradle to the grave. The lawdictionary.org.
Honorable Member for River Sally.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
The honorable member stated that NHI will be accessible to all and also equitable. But in the NHI, Mr. Speaker, there are out-of-pocket costs, and also when you require special care, you'll have to go abroad. Can honorable member please provide clarity? When the poor man encounters this problem, how will it be resolved?
Honorable Member, can you please provide some clarity?
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister for Health clearly stated that we will be in partnership with countries like Cuba and also provided under the basket of services for the NHI, we also have an initiative called co-payments, where if the claimant cannot pay the full price or if the services does not cover the full price, then the NHI can cover part of the cost and the claimant can cover the other part. May I continue?
You may.
It is undeniable that unlike national health insurance, the current model of health financing is unsustainable. Right? Okay. The lawdictionary.org defines accessibility as the ability and ease a customer can access a good, service, or facility. This is right in synchronization with the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. Remember, the Sustainable Development Goal 3 is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. How can this be done if the national health insurance is not accessible? Worthy of notation, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that the national health insurance receives legal counsel from the Attorney General. He serves to review contracts and ensures that every action coordinated goes in accordance with the agreement. This counsel will also serve to prevent or seek justice in the case of a breach of contract. The Attorney General would then fight for our people to ensure that we always have full use of the services provided. This.
Honorable Member for River Sally.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
We have sat here and listened patiently, and we are still awaiting some pressing issues and some answers from the government side. Firstly, why wait on the NHI before the government starts to make significant contributions to the health issues? Why not do it like Belize? Also, the proposition does not seem to be aware of the resolution. This is not endorsement. This is a cry for immediate establishment. Where are your proposals? What are you actually doing to implement the NHI? We need answers to that. Your current proposal as it stands is not valid. We need clarity. Thank you.
Honorable Member, can you just allow the member for River Sally to stand again?
Okay.
Thank you. Can you just ask the two questions that you asked clearly so that he can respond?
First things, why wait on the NHI before the government starts to make significant contribution to our health issues? They are rushing for the implementation of the NHI to fix our issues. Why not start now? That's the first question. The second question, they do not seem to be aware of the resolution. This is not endorsement. They are looking for the immediate implementation of the NHI. We are not looking for endorsement.
Honorable Member, can you provide some clarity on the two questions that were asked?
Mr. Speaker, we are not here to endorse, and I agree with the member. We are here to urge the government to establish the National Health Insurance Program with a sense of urgency because it's something that we need. Now, a part of that establishment, and Mr. Speaker, permit me to quote from the stakeholders engagement session.
Permission granted.
Right. Now, firstly, to ensure standards of care for the national health insurance, we would first look at human resource. We would have development sessions for medical practitioners, specialists, training, and enforcement of bond agreements. The nurses would be able to scale up to bachelors in nursing, and we would train have training for family nurse practitioners. Mr. Speaker, we are not only going to stop at the human resource because our facilities need upgrading as well. We are going to strengthen our health system with the help of the OACS Regional Health Project.
Member for Riverside.
Mr. Speaker, I stand a point of order.
The honourable member is in the middle of answering your question, but please state your point of order.
The honorable member did not ask permission to use his mobile device in the House.
Thank you, honourable member. Member for Upper Hermitage, you now have permission to use your mobile device. Please continue responding to the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Right. Now, under the OACS Regional Health Project, we would have surveillance and lab strengthening, and we would have emergency response, EOC. Further, under the 11th European Development Fund, we would have electronic medical records, district wellness council, reorganization of the current district management purposes. And even further, under infrastructure development, we're looking to have a smart health facility, PAHO, climate change and disaster management. We would have a golf health center, which would fall under smart and green, the green drive. We would also, which is already done, the PAH and the PRH in the Sutton Health Center, the Hillsborough Health Center, and the St. David's Health Center. And we are not forgetting mental health because we have a rehabilitation center. This is an institution for elderly and children. So I would like to ask the member on the other side if that answers a question as to how we are going to strengthen our health system.
Honourable member, that I think answers the second question. The first question was why is the government waiting on the NHI before they improve the health services on the island?
Because they go hand in hand, Mr. Speaker. They go hand in hand together. We need both the NHI and the improvement to work together so that we can get a system that is set up, that when it is set up, it does not fail. We are looking at sustainability. We want it to last long. So under the NHI, it will provide for a sense of sustainability so that our health system, when it is up and running, when it is strengthened, that it would last not for today and tomorrow, but for today, tomorrow, and forever.
Honourable member, your response is still not clear as to why we need to wait on the NHI.
Mr. Speaker, as with all things, it happens in phases. May I draw an analogy to a baby? Before a baby can start to stand up and walk like this, it must creep. And then he will start to take little steps, holding the wall, to give himself grace to make sure that he makes the proper steps. Mr. Speaker, the reason why that it's going to take a little time, Mr. Speaker, is because we are rolling out the NHI in phases, and everything in this life takes time. So I would like the honorable members on the opposition to be patient.
Honourable member for Snell.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order. I see the honourable members are deeply conversing. If the honourable member for Hermitage is incapable of answering the question, perhaps he should consider giving way, Mr. Speaker, and not disrespect this honourable House.
Thank you very much, honourable member. Member for Hermitage, the question was pretty straightforward, and I'm asking, you have given a lot of responses, but your responses have kind of just ran around the question. The question is simple. Why do we need to wait? Are you listening to me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The question is simple. Why do we need to wait on the NHI before we can improve our current health system? Simple question.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to give way to the honorable member for High Street.
Honorable member for High Street. Please be mindful that you are standing simply to answer the question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I understand. The question proposed was why did we wait now to, what was the question?
No, the question proposed is why do we need to wait on the NHI before we can improve the health services on the island?
Okay. We are waiting on the NHI because we believe that we are not just going to improve for today. Let me give an example, Mr. Speaker. Let's say we go to the doctor today and we get this particular treatment and we don't get it next week. We want a system, we want to introduce a system that is durable and sustainable. I think the member was trying to say that we have looked at the health conditions and so forth and saw it fit to implement the NHI. No, in order to combat this problem holistically, or in order to have it to be more sustainable.
So are you saying, because the only thing that will be different under the NHI is that persons will be making... Thank you, Sergeant of Arms. Can we have some order in this honorable house, please? The only thing that will be different under the NHI is that persons will be contributing to healthcare, something that they are not doing now. So are you saying that the funds is what we are waiting for? Is that what you are saying?
We are waiting on the funds and access to additional health professionals and so forth to help sustain the healthcare system. So we are waiting on funding and we are waiting on assistance.
And we cannot get assistance without the NHI?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable member for Upper Hermitage, you may conclude your speech, your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to conclude with a short story. 3 boys of 3 different heights wanted to view a cricket match at the Hermitage playing field. However, they had no money to enter the pavilion. They then decided to watch from the fence. Near the fence, there were 3... Mr. Speaker, permit me 45 seconds to conclude.
You have 1 minute. You can conclude. Thank you.
Near the fence, there were 3 wooden boxes. The boys each stood on 1 box. However, the shortest of the 3 was unable to see the match properly. Then, the tallest boy decided to give his box to his friend, for even without the box, he was able to see clearly. So, the boxes were now divided. 2 boxes for the shortest boy, 1 box for the second tallest boy, and the tallest boy had no boxes. However, they were all able to view the match clearly. The boxes, Mr. Speaker, represent the national health insurance. The cricket match is the basket of services provided, and the boys are all claimants, each of whom were awarded equitable access. The national health insurance is indisputably the most appropriate option for Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. Equitability and accessibility. I thank you.
Honorable member for River Sally.
Mr. Speaker, before I begin my presentation, the government stated that immediacy is the right action. But, Mr. Speaker, will you rush to build your house where there is not a solid foundation? I'll begin my speech. I'll open with a scripture I've come to love. It's taken from Psalm 127, verse 4, and it reads, Mr. Speaker, as arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. And it ends here. In Grenada, the youths make up a significant portion of the population, so therefore they are the future. So I want to know, Mr. Speaker, why were the youth excluded from the decision-making process when it comes to the NHI? Upon conducting...
Member for High Street,
I stand on a point of clarity.
please state your point of clarity.
The minister said youth were excluded, but I can surely recall, Mr. Speaker, that there have been ongoing forums which have included the youth to be educated on such said topic. So can she provide any material or facts to state that there hasn't been any information disseminated? Thank you.
Honourable Member, can you clarify why it is that you said the youths have been left out of the process?
I'll gladly do that, Mr. Speaker. A national sensitization session held on September 5th, 2018. Present in the audience were the Ministry of Health, Advisory Committee on the NHI, Ministry of Social Development, National Insurance Management or Board, the National Health Insurance Secretariat, and a UE team headed by Professor Carl Theodore. Mr. Speaker, would you want me to repeat this? Because up to now, I haven't called a representative from the youths. May I continue with my speech? Upon conducting informal interviews among the youths, the majority had no idea what NHI was, neither its purpose. And this, Mr. Speaker, is alarming, seeing as NHI will impact them in the long run. In an article on nowgrenada.com entitled Sustaining NHI and Covering Everyone, it points out, and I quote, a universal healthcare plan is what the NHI would be, and it is not easy to sustain financially. It demands broad support and wide contributions, especially, listen, especially from the young able-bodied workers. Their contributions usually assist in subsidizing the care provided to the elderly who are unable to work and may be chronically ill, end of quote. Mr. Speaker, with a declining birth rate and a population growth of 0.4%, who will be the ones to contribute toward the youth when they become elderly in a few years, Mr. Speaker? We are setting ourselves up for failure. Also, according to a news article published on May 27, 2019, the Minister of Health stated, Mr. Speaker, permit me to quote, and I quote, when we increase the budget to healthcare, it comes from somewhere else. It may come from education. It may come from works. It comes from somewhere else, end of quote. I don't know about the members on the other side, Mr. Speaker, but I would not sit here in this country and play the eeny, meeny, miny, mo game and have to see the Ministry of Youth or other ministries become shortchanged, Mr. Speaker. I urge the government to use sound and logical reasoning and stop operating by chance. This is a country, not a raffle. Also, Mr. Speaker, in order to be contracted by the NHI, it states you will have to be screened and have to meet quality service standards.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
The honourable member stated about the youth and stressed on having a youth representative on the panel. But as my colleague stated, that the youths are involved because we will have some competitions in place where the youths will do research and and get information and make contribution towards that. Also, in the school-based assessment, we are looking at to implement the NHI in this so that research can be done so that the young people will be fully aware. So from a young age, they can have in their mind as soon as they start to work, they're going to pay the contributions because they'll be getting information at a very young age. So I want to remember to know that.
Honourable Member, would you like to respond?
Yes, I will.
Please do so.
The honourable member speaking in the future tense. Go back to the resolution. Immediate implementation. You are speaking in the future tense, honourable member. Let me go back to my speech. Also, Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, to be contracted by the NHI, it states that you'll have to be screened and have to meet quality service standards. We need the government to provide the criteria for this process because we need to see the logic behind this, also how stringent of a process this will be and the practicality of it all. In addition, to be contracted by the NHI, you must accept negotiated costs or rates. From my viewpoint, Mr. Speaker, this has exploitation written all over it. Seen as these persons stand a chance of not being paid based on their qualifications. One of the things also suggested by the NHI is that it is looking for additional support to strengthen the health sector through the support of the 11th European Development Fund, abbreviated EDF. But bear in mind, Mr. Speaker, the same EDF donated $7.4 million to develop a polyclinic in Guelph. It looks like the government is just bad begging, Mr. Speaker, because after providing these funds, we want to know what's in it for these organizations. What is the government giving to them in return? What's the hidden agenda? To conclude, I would like the government to ask themselves these questions. To what extent
Honourable Member for Stairs.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to stand on a point of clarity.
Please state your point of clarity.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I'd like the opposition, since they have a problem with the NHI being established, Mr. Speaker, I'd like the Honourable Minister to take note of the resolution. I'd like to know which resolution she's looking at, because it says to establish and not implement, unless she's doing another debate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would also like the Honourable Minister to clarify what is it that they have in place if they have an issue with the National Health Insurance.
Honourable Member, I would like you to respond to what do you all think should happen instead of the NHI.
Mr. Speaker, it looks like the government side has misinterpreted our stance. We on the opposition side do not have a problem with the fact of the National Health Insurance. The problem we are having, Mr. Speaker, is that the immediacy of it all, the NHI as it stands, is not sustainable. The proposals are not reasonable enough to be implemented in our country. Let me proceed, Mr. Speaker. To conclude, as I was saying, I would like the government to ask themselves these questions. To what extent are the youths or young adults with work limitations covered by the NHI? What is the type of coverage provided to these individuals? How does it vary? And how does it compare for those in the same age group without work limitations? Till then, it seems to me that the government is playing the role of the prodigal son, leaving home when they are not fully ready. But I hope, Mr. Speaker, when they have stepped out blindly and encountered the rude awakening awaiting them, they wouldn't come running back. Because by then, Mr. Speaker, it might be too late. I thank you.
Are there any further contributions to the motion? Honourable Member for Canning.
Mr. Speaker, before I begin my speech, please permit me to quote from the great philanthropist Sangram Singh.
Permission granted.
Maintaining good health should be the primary focus of everyone, end of quote. Mr. Speaker, the youths of the country who have recently started earning an income and have not saved as much to provide for in cases of emergency will greatly benefit from the National Health Insurance. Mr. Speaker, the youths will enjoy health services which they could not otherwise afford under the current system. Look around. Watch the amount of people who are suffering from ailments and their families have to be going around with donation sheets, a truck with a loudspeaker, and buckets to collect funds. Do we want this to continue? Given the stance of the opposition, it appears as if we want to continue carrying the label of a people who go around the island soliciting aid to cover health expenses. Mr. Speaker, I cannot stand for this, hence my embrace of the NHI. Mr. Speaker, the youths will enjoy improved healthcare which leads to a happier and a more productive Grenada. We all will agree that a healthy workforce, especially of young people, will be a wealthier workforce. You see, Mr. Speaker, the human resource can be likened to the engine of a vehicle. It is the main source of power. It keeps the vehicle going. It is therefore imperative, Mr. Speaker, that this prized entity be nurtured and given the best care. With the NHI, Mr. Speaker, we are proposing to give our human resource, our workforce, our youth, our people, the best care through the NHI. Our aim as a government is to protect the youths and the families from which financial hardships, that is as a result of healthcare expenses. Mr. Speaker, the National Health Insurance will give the youth equity and sustainability in financing health services needed, such as dental services and chronic and emergency health services. Going forward, we are committed to doing the necessary groundwork in terms of education, performance of macroeconomic analysis, health insurance industry analysis, and information technology infrastructure assessment, all of which were alluded to by my colleagues. In so doing, we are guaranteeing accessibility, we are guaranteeing sustainability, and we are guaranteeing equitability. We are not turning a blind eye to the process involved prior to NHI's implementation. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we are fully aware of this reality. So, when we suggest immediacy, we are suggesting moving with a sense of urgency to actualize an initiative that will prove beneficial to our nation's people. With the NHI, we are saying no more to continued suffering brought about by financial constraints. With the NHI, we are saying no more to the motorcade funding label. With the NHI, we are saying yes to betterment, yes to health, yes to access, yes to a sustainable scheme, and yes to fair delivery of health services. Yes, yes, yes. I support my colleagues and urge the opponents to this resolution to move with alacrity to actualize this move. Let's establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposals. I thank you.
Honorable Member for La Fortune.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to address what the Minister said, the begging still will be happening, seeing that the pocket costs, the NHI doesn't cover, since that the NHI doesn't cover some out-of-pocket costs. So when the poor man can't cover these costs, wouldn't they turn back to the motorcades? Mr. Speaker, my colleagues and I are not in support with the government to immediately establish a national health insurance or the NHI. But immediately educating and sensitizing should be their first step. Mr. Speaker, what is the rush? A question that has been pondering on my heart far too long. Mr. Speaker, the government of Grenada was in an agreement with CXC, stating by the year 2020, all exams should be done electronically. Mr. Speaker, something that was done in a rush, because right now we don't even have the facilities or the resources to have that done. Mr. Speaker, that is how we want NHI to work? Mr. Speaker, what is the rush? Such move beckons careful thoughts, prudence, informed decision-making, and meticulous moves. This is not a game of Simon Says, when one is asked to dance and everyone starts dancing. We have to take time to listen to the rhythm of the music and consider which dance move aligns.
Mr. Speaker, I mean the NHI must be approached gradually. Mr. Speaker, is the government trying to hide something? Which brought me back to growing up as a child. When my mother would be in the kitchen frying bakes, and the minute time she would turn her back, I would rush to the kitchen and grab that bakes, push it into my clothes, and rush back into my room, not even thinking if she was calling or what she was saying, because I'm too focused on what I was hiding. Mr. Speaker, is the government hiding something? I reiterate on this question, Mr. Speaker, because they're not giving us a chance to properly digest the NHI. Mr. Speaker, imagine some person, Mr. Speaker, I need you to ponder your thoughts for a moment. I think back to November 24th, 2016 and November 16th of 2018, when Grenada had tried the referendum with the means on voting on several bills. How did that work out? Mr. Speaker, it failed tremendously. You would even hear a person say, Mr. Speaker, permission to quote. And I quote, I don't even understand what I'm voting on, unquote. Mr. Speaker, I personally did a survey within the Lafourchune area, and to my great surprise, 9/10 of these persons had no clue what the NHI or National Health Insurance even means. Mr. Speaker, imagine some persons asking me if there's really something called the NHI. Mr. Speaker, our people really need to be educated and understand what is going on in and around them. Mr. Speaker, I smell a stench of incompetence with the government. Mr. Speaker, as I close, the government needs to sit at a proper preparatory work, like revamping the healthcare system, doing retraining of health professionals as needed to facilitate, meet with citizens, properly sensitize and educate them, and so that the next time you ask a Grenadian on the NHI, they won't say what's that, but I'm ready for it to start. I thank you.
Are there any further contributions to the motion? Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I sat here and I listened. And what I've gathered, Mr. Speaker, is that the opposition rolled out a series of issues in our health sector. And we clearly stated there is no secret about this. I sat waiting for suggestions as how we can go forward with this. But yet for all, they put in forward to the House problems. We have already started working. There are work even in Maribor Health Facility. It is a smart hospital, smart green hospital. The one in Guave, presently being constructed, is also will be developed into a smart green hospital, Mr. Speaker. So there is work. There is work. And there is supplies, Mr. Speaker. There is supplies coming in, Mr. Speaker. And the government has also established bonds and students we give scholarship to. Already we have some returning, and they're going to go directly into service. So the process is there. We are unrolling. So as things unfold, I guess as much, their minds that was clouded will no longer be clouded. Everything will become clear. Mr. Speaker also stated that the light will shine on those. Now we can see who really love people here. Now we can see who really love people here, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a well-structured NHI. And I know they're questioning about the financing and how it will be disbursed and so forth. Mr. Speaker, here we have, when the contributions come in, there will be an area for claims. And the claims going to go directly to the public or private providers. So we are contracting private health facilities, so that will increase the number of professionals. That will increase. So you cannot say, oh, I have to go and wait 5 hours. You can go to another health center and get the same service. We are looking to abroad and contract private providers as well. So in case any Grenadian leave go abroad, we'll fully make my way of the facilities they can go to, Mr. Speaker. And we have ambassadors. We have ambassadors, so they will do all of this spearheading, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the opposition leader, the opposition, Mr. Speaker, I know that the tongue is in a slippery place, Mr. Speaker. So instead they give you suggestions, they want to solve the problem to say that, oh, it wouldn't work. Let us try, that's what I said. It was in their power. It was in their power to do it. They failed to make the step. They failed, Mr. Speaker. They failed. And we are not going to fail, Mr. Speaker. Happy am I to say, Mr. Speaker, happy am I to say, Mr. Speaker, that we're going to employ the members of the opposition to sit on a committee. We are going to do it. There will be full scrutiny. We want transparency. And once we're going to sit on a committee, so we can take the information and bring back to the members. Mr. Speaker, no stone will be left unturned. We will do this collectively because we love people. Mr. Speaker, no one should be frightened. I know my member spoke on the motorcade. I tried to heard music. I hear it. And I want to, what line next? What digital promoted? What event what he has? But here and behold, fundraiser for health. Mr. Speaker, I know the opposition wants our health sector to develop. I know that. And I'm saying here, we can do this. The NHI is a structure that we are looking to establish to solve the problems. And we are doing it in phases. I know that you all want to tell you all everything now. But the honorable member mentioned the phases. She outlined them. She outlined. We cannot just throw in everything at once. Listen. But you have failed because you want to make us look bad. But Mr. Speaker, we are not. We are not. We are confident. My members are capable. This is why they are sitting here. They are. They are capable. And we are going to do justice to the country. Why? Mr. Speaker, let me tell the House this. The Prime Minister, one more minute, Mr. Speaker.
1 minute. That's 1 minute.
As the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, I will be the first to make a contribution. I will be the first to make such contribution. This is my home. This is my land. We are one. Let's fight this together. Let us fight this together. You outline the problems, the mortalities, the death, we have so many of the cancers and we are dying. NHI, we're saying here, we provide additional services because what we're not providing, you can get it outside through contracts. And we are going to also have the Attorney General work with us for the legal aspect. For the legal aspect to make sure everything is proper. Mr. Speaker, it is good. That's why I say I'm optimistic in my speech. That's why I'm happy. Because I can see long lives of our youth. I can see the elderly going 1 year longer. Mr. Speaker, we are here to serve, and the opposition will not stop us.
Honorable members, the question is that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas healthcare in Grenada is a public good which should be equitably accessed by all citizens. And whereas the government has a responsibility to provide quality healthcare services to all citizens, regardless of the economic situation, with the aim of improving the health of the people of the state of Grenada. And whereas the current model of health financing through tax revenue is unsustainable, and the government is therefore committed to finding alternative means of financing healthcare. And whereas government has assessed these alternatives and proposes to fulfill this commitment through a national health insurance program, and whereas the youth parliamentarians of the Parish of St. Patrick's have considered the proposals for the National Health Insurance Program and deem it to be an appropriate mechanism for sustainable financing for Grenada's public health sector, be it resolved that the Youth Parliament of the Parish of St. Patrick's urges the Government of Grenada to immediately establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposals. As many as are in favor that the resolution be agreed, say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. The honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I call for a division of the House.
Thank you.
Division. Honorable Member for Upper Mali. Aye. Honorable Member for Lower Latas.
A resounding aye, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Sauteurs.
Aye.
Honorable Member for Upper Latas.
A resounding aye.
Honorable Member for Bathway.
Aye.
Honorable Member for High Street.
Aye.
Honorable Member for Mount Jimmy.
Aye.
Honorable Member for Upper Hermitage.
Without a shadow of a doubt, aye.
Honorable Member for Canning.
Aye.
Honorable Member for Lower Hermitage.
Nay.
Honorable Member for Pointsville.
An unwavering no.
Honorable Member for Snell Hall.
No.
Honorable Member for Moncraven.
Nay.
Honorable Member for Lower Mali.
No.
Honorable Member for Sinners?
No.
Honorable Member for Riverside?
A solid no.
Honorable Member for La Fortune?
Nay.
Number of ayes, 8. Number of noes, 8.
But honorable members, the resolution has not been agreed, seeing that there is an equal amount of votes in the House. Honorable members, I apologize on behalf of the clerks and myself. There was an error in counting. So the actual division is 9 ayes and 8 noes, which means that the resolution has been agreed on. Honorable member for La Fortune.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this House be adjourned to sign die.
Honorable members, the question proposed is that this honorable House stands adjourned, sign, die. All those who are of this opinion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The business of this Youth Parliament stands adjourned. Sign, Nadai. We ask that those in the audience and the members of the House remain seated as we invite the Minister with responsibility for youth development in the Ministry of Youth Development, Sports, Culture and the Arts, Honorable Kate Lewis, give some brief remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I recognize the 2 MPs for St. Patrick, East and West, Ms. Anthony Bolson and Ms. Pamela Moses. And to all of our youth parliamentarians, members of the audience, good evening to everyone. Let us congratulate our youth parliamentarians for an excellent
for an excellent debate here this evening. I think they did a good job, and we are very proud from the Ministry of Youth. As we we move on to our National Youth Parliament on Friday, we are preparing our youth parliamentarians to take up leadership roles. And this is our government's commitment in giving them the opportunity in which they can elaborate and debate issues of national importance. As I also want to give way to the member for St. Patrick West to bring some remarks, as the members here belong to St. Patrick Parish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister and Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrews Northeast. Let me also recognize my colleague from St. Patrick East, Honorable Pamela Moses, Minister in the Ministry of Education and Human Resource Development. Honorable Mr. Speaker, Clerk and Deputy Clerk of the House of Representatives, Ministers of Government and Parliamentary Representatives for the various constituencies within St. Patrick, members of the opposition, members of the press, members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen. With the permission of the Minister for Youth and Sports, I have been asked to make some very brief remarks. I have been in the Parliament of Grenada for over 20 years now. I have sat on the side of the government for a number of years. I've also sat on the opposition bench as a member of the Senate. And I can tell you, without a doubt, that the quality of debate that took place here today could equal or rival any debate that has taken place at our House of Parliament. The topic, before I go into that, I want to say something about the Prime Minister. I have made it clear. I have made it clear that I am not contesting any election again. And I've been looking for a replacement. I need not go much further. The next Prime Minister of Grenada will be from St. Patrick and Mali. In particular, I'm impressed by the posture, eloquence, and delivery of the Prime Minister. That's a Prime Minister in the making. I'm also impressed by all of the presenters. Their presentations were scholarly, well-researched, and clearly highlighted the importance of the topic of the discussion, national health insurance, which is the most important social issue confronting our nation today. The members on the government side were very clear in promoting national health insurance, which is very good. But we should not dismiss the opposition. And at times, I believe the Speaker got involved. I am not accusing the Speaker of being partial, but he got involved, and he was trying to get the members to say certain things. But I think the point they were making is very important. If they're saying that we have a broken health system, as some are saying in the opposition, then the argument will be we have to really wait on the funding from the National Health Insurance to fix it. And I don't believe we have to wait. As a matter of fact, I was a bit hesitant when the member said, yes, we have to wait. And we don't have to wait. As a matter of fact, there are plans programs on stream right now to fix the system. Because we are looking at two things, fixing a health system and financing, providing financing for those who cannot afford help to pay for health care. But the two can go hand in hand, but we do not have to wait. Because if we have to wait, it means that we have two major issues on our hand. Having to fix the system and then having to provide the kind of support to those who cannot afford health system. So your argument was very, very, very good. And I said, you must come, you must give the speaker some kudos for helping you to push your argument. But once again, I must say I want to commend the Minister of Youth and Sports for taking the initiative, as well as our staff, Mr. Bihari and other members of the ministry for this initiative in St. Patrick. I think it augurs well for the future. I understand that there's a youth parliament on Friday, and I'm hoping to see, well, maybe not a replication, but as many of you in the parliament, because again, I must say, in all my years in parliament, I believe you can rival any of the senior members who have been elected. And one day, I'm looking forward to many of you sitting in actual parliament and making the laws of our country. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
This time, I'd like to welcome Nazinga Smith as she offers the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, all. It is indeed a pleasure to be given the opportunity to thank and express our gratitude on behalf of the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliamentarians. I would first like to thank the project officer for her welcoming remarks. We are also grateful for the support and presence of the Minister for Youth, Sports, Culture, and the Arts. We also like to be thankful for the presence of the MPs, Honorable Pamela Moses and Honorable Anthony Boswain, and other present and former government officials. We thank the organizers and facilitators of this youth parliament training and execution. We thank the media houses for their live broadcast of this evening's proceedings. And finally, family, friends, other contributing staff, and the fellow youth parliamentarians for St. Patrick's, who now I can call my family, for the many hours of preparation we have spent together. And I can say on behalf of all of us that this experience has been fulfilling, rewarding, enriching, and enlightening. And for this, we are eternally grateful. Thank you.
So officially, this Honorable House stands adjourned.
All right, you're watching the conclusion of live coverage of St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament. The sitting at MacDonald College, of course, has since ended, all part of a series of parish youth parliaments organized by the Ministry of Youth Development. Members of the House debated the resolution, be it resolved that the Youth Parliament of Parish of St. Patrick urges the government of Grenada to immediately establish the National Health Insurance Program in accordance with the current proposals. Of course, the motion has since passed 9-8 in the chambers. We also want to let you know that one of the concerns coming out of today's debate, especially from the side of government, has to do with the number of motorcades being held throughout the nation to help raise funds for those who are battling various health conditions, for example. Of course, as if to say, this is why the NHI, the National Health Insurance, is so very necessary at this time, to have that sort of provision for Grenadians' health care. This has been a very spirited debate. Of course, we've heard remarks by Member of Parliament for St. Patrick West, Honorable Anthony Boson. He has been in high praise of the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament, and of course he singled out the Prime Minister, Shondell. Let me just get his surname, Shondell Joseph. He was in high praise of his debating skills, and he went on record by saying that the quality of debate can equal or rival any debate that has taken place in our national parliament. So there you go, of course, words by Honorable Anthony Boson, Member of Parliament for St. Patrick West, commending the initiative, being very impressed, in fact, by the quality of debate here today. And of course, he went on to say we don't have to wait until the NHI is implemented to fix health care in Grenada. He has gone on record to say that. You know, the NHI has been the subject of much debate in recent times, especially relative to how is it going to be funded. Of course, the NHI Secretariat has said that it is going to be funded by government's contribution, as well as by broad-based taxes, specifically from employers and employees. And so no doubt this has been a very spirited debate. It has come to the fore right here as part of the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament. We want to let you know that there will be a national sitting at Parliament Building at Mount Weldale this Friday. So feel free to be there to be part of this undertaking. Of course, the Parish Youth Parliament will continue throughout the nation. St. David is on the cards, and all the other parishes. Of course, it's going to be a break for Spice Mass, after which the initiative will resume. But no doubt, this debate here today, according to Member of Parliament for St. Patrick West, has lifted the standard of debates in this ongoing, of course, series of youth parliament throughout the nation. Thank you so very much for joining us. We've been wanting to talk with the Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Shondell Joseph. He was in VAR throughout his presentation. We've also been wanting to talk with the Leader of the Opposition and Shadow Minister for Health, as well as Member of Parliament for Lower Hermitage, Nzinga Smith. All things being equal, we'll bring you that conversation as soon as they are available. We will also like to talk to the Shadow Minister for Finance, for example, Member of Parliament for Snell Hall, Matthew Williams. He too was in VAR, and the audience was heard saying he had a probing nature to him. He was able to seek clarity on what was expressed by members of the government side. He wanted clarity, he wanted a better perspective, and so his ability to probe came to the fore. But no doubt he too was spirited in his debate and had much to offer on this very important issue, that of the National Health Insurance Program, of course, which will soon be rolled out in Grenada. So once we can have the conversation with the MP for St. Patrick West, we'll bring it to you. And of course, a few members of the House, both government side and opposition side, we will bring you these conversations. No doubt, we thank you so very much for tuning into the live right here at MacDonald College, St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament, live on Mikey Live, also Government Information Service, GIS. Thank you so very much for being part of this live broadcast. Joining me live is the Acting Coordinator of Youth in Grenada, Royden Bihari. I know you've been having so much on your plate, ensuring things are in order, but I want to get your impression of today's events. St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament. MP Boson has been in high praise of what he has seen and, of course, what he has listened to.
Definitely, Kenra. I believe that today's sitting is no other than exceptional. We would have held parish parliament sittings in years before, and I can tell you this one is one that will go down in the memory lane, the memory books. It has been very, very refreshing. One that actually could have seen a lot of research, a lot of deliberation went into it, a lot of preparation would have went into the entire. I think he actually would have still cake from the other parliamentarians, which is the level of eloquence, the level of delivery, but additionally his the level of creativity in crafting some of the message and delivery for today's session. But all in all, we also must give credit to the facilitator who would have actually done Parliament sitting, and the resolution is surrounding the Electronic Crimes Act, and that one is also very controversial, and one that will be very controversial, and we anticipating a memorable day. A matter of fact, from yesterday count, we actually had to remove some of the buses that was organized because of the seating capacity for the room. So we anticipate a bumper event on Friday, one that will be second to none on the national seating calendar for Grenada.
Look forward to the resolution on Friday. You know, this is a very typical one, huh?
Yes, a very typical one.
Thank you. Talking there with the Acting Coordinator of Youth in Grenada, Royden Bihar. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Right. So, of course, we are into the final part of the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament. We'd like to invite Prime Minister and Finance Minister at this time. Please have a seat, sir, and thank you so very much for joining the conversation. I must say you were on fire today. You were given much praise by Member of Parliament for St. Patrick West, Honourable Anthony Boson. Recount for us your presentation and the work that went into it.
Well, since I'm the Prime Minister and also Minister of Finance, right? And to say that only I stayed up to 3 o'clock this morning to put my speech together, and looking at how the build-up of the debate went, and then I was still kind of nervous when it's my turn to the rebuttal. I saying, how can I bring it home? How can I make sure that the Prime Minister that this thing is well sold? So I decided, you know what, use my tactics, use the abilities, the talent that I have to deliver and bring that presentation home.
Right. What would you take away from this exercise today as part of your presentation?
Well, one, always be optimistic, right? Regardless of how things go, be optimistic because the turnaround could be great or than you imagine it, and the cohesiveness of how everything went is, yeah.
Is politics on your agenda, active politics?
To say this down to yesterday, while we were rehearsing yesterday, I said to myself, politics is something that is very difficult because after you want to sit, then you're the people to deal with and settle down and provide. And I was saying, I think that's the hardest part being a politician. Winning a seat is one, but when it comes to delivery, that's where the groundwork become more challenging. And I was like still wavering about it, but based on comments, it look as though I need to channel. Darius?
Yes. The MP from St. Patrick West, Honorable Angela Bosa, said that there will be a Prime Minister from St. Patrick.
There's possibility. There are young, vibrant people. Yeah, there's a possibility.
We wish you the very best. Absolutely amazing presentation. Prime Minister and Finance Minister Shondell Joseph. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Welcome.
Right, we'd like to have a conversation with the speaker now. So we invite the speaker to the set so we can get into his head a bit. Come right ahead, come right ahead. The Speaker of the House today, is it Deshaun Edwards?
That's yes, Deshaun Edwards.
Yes. Control of the proceedings today. Remind us of your presentation and your own impression of it.
Yeah, well, today's debate was very impressive, actually. I was really impressed with the level of preparation that went into it. The debaters seemed really well informed, right? So they knew the information, and so when questions were posed, they were able to give good responses. There was one question that they tried to evade. I think it's because it was a difficult question, and I had to make it mandatory that they respond. Right? But when they did respond, eventually, the answer that was given was a proper one. So I thought today's proceedings were really well put together.
Can you explain for us what happened relative to the tallying of the votes? I know there was a declaration and then you had to come back to say there was an error. Can you explain that?
Well, it seems like when the clerk was writing out information, she would have missed one person from the government side, right? And so that is why we had the error of 8-8. But then when we looked and checked the amount of persons, we realized it had to be an error. So we just rectified it. Yeah.
Very well, but it was pretty smooth how you handled it. Any advice for other young people, young men in particular, who want to get involved in the national conversation?
Well, I think it's important that young people, the youth, find a way to let voices be heard, especially on issues like this, which are major issues and that are going to affect us in the future. Right? If the NHI is implemented, every one of us will be affected by it. Right? So things like the Youth Parliament, youth Parliament and youth forums give us an opportunity to ensure that our voices are heard. And I think it's important that young people, especially young men, find a way to make themselves available for processes like this, right? Because that is how our voices will be heard. That is how we can affect change in our country, and we can really be part of the process, right? And that is I can't overstress the importance of this, because as youth, we are the future of Grenada, and it is important that we ensure that our voices are heard on major issues such as these.
I wish you the very best. Thank you so very much. Deshaun Edwards, Speaker of the House today. Thank you. What a conversation, of course, the St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament, the conclusion of it happening at this time. We'd like to invite the Member of Parliament for Snell Hall, Matthew Williams, also Shadow Minister for Finance. Come have a seat. Come have a seat, indeed. And we want you to recount for us your performance today. First of all, I have to say, you brought to the fore someone who likes to probe. You like to see clarity in a lot of things. Tell me about that.
Yes, I do. I like to be certain about my interpretation of other people's points. I wasn't only seeking clarity for myself, but also the audience and whoever else would have been watching.
How has this experience changed your life?
Well, before we actually got the debate topic, I actually didn't know much about the national health insurance. So it did teach me a lot on that issue to solidify my stance on it.
And I suspect, of course, you had to do a lot of research.
Yes, we did. It was a bit difficult because some of the sources are not readily available, but we did as best as we could to present a clear argument.
Is politics on your cards in the future?
I would not think so. I have not considered it.
Well, that is a lot of convincing to do me because, I mean, based on your presentation today, you came across quite passionate and you came across as someone whose interest is national dialogue at the level of Parliament.
Well, I am quite passionate about this issue. I always say that I am most likely going to live here for the next 40 years. So anything that takes place here and will affect me for that amount of time, I think I should have a reasonable say in it, at least have a stance on it, whether I agree or disagree. So I always try to take part in those things.
Well, thank you very much, Shadow Minister of Finance and Member of Parliament for Sneho, Matthew Williams. Thank you so very much. So, of course, we've been talking to a few of the participants. I'd like to talk to the lady in black with the hat on. Feel free to come forward so you can have that conversation. Yes, feel free, have a seat, and feel free. Just remind us of your name.
Laurie Mars. Laurie Mars. Yes.
Laurie Mars.
Yes.
You have put forward today a very spirited presentation.
Thank you.
Your hair and my observation of the audience, they were very much appreciative of your presentation. They were nodding, they were showing expressions of interest. Good for you. Tell me about your presentation.
Yes, so my presentation was mainly focused on how NHI benefits the society. The persons that make up our Grenada. We looked at how the elderly, I looked at how the elderly would be left out if we don't have NHI in place. And I looked at how if NHI is implemented, the benefits that it has, their health is secured.
Tell me a bit about the research that went into preparing for today.
A lot of research. It was really difficult because since NHI is something that's being modeled right now, it's kind of hard to find information. So we had to, as a team, we had to collectively share our information back and forth, come up with ideas, come up with proposals as to bring across a strong argument. Yes.
How has this exercise changed your life?
Well, for one, I am a little more confident in public speaking, and I've made a family here, I've made friends, and debate has been something that I've shied away from, and now I'm doing it, and so I'm really glad for this opportunity, and it has really made me a better person. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Alrighty, so no doubt we'd like to put a wrap to this live coverage at this time. Just to give you a recap of the proceedings today, you've been part of St. Patrick's Parish Youth Parliament, happening, of course, it happened at MacDonald College. Of course, it brought together a number of young people from the parish debating of the motion relative to the implementation of the National Health Insurance, a very topical issue, and it has been an issue which has been garnering much attention recently because individuals have been wanting to know how is it going to be funded and how is it going to be sustained. Of course, the government is going to be providing its part of the support, so government contribution is in. According to the National Health Insurance Secretariat, the Secretariat has also said that the broad-based taxes will be accounted for relative to employers and employees' contributions. So no doubt this topic is going to be further expanded on as time elapses, but This Parish Youth Parliament as well will be continued. St. David's also on the cards to come up. And of course, don't forget that there'll be a national sitting this Friday at Parliament Building at Monk Welldale. And the topic to be focused on will be the Electronic Crimes Act. So don't forget to tune into that. If you can be there at Monk Welldale, Parliament Building, feel free to be there and show your support to the young ones who have been having some national conversations on very important national issues. So thank you very much for joining this live coverage. Thank you to Mikey Live. Thank you to the Government Information Service. Thank you to all the other members of the team who have come together to provide this sort of coverage here today. So until next time, I'm Ken Rivichis. Thanks for watching and have a good one. Bye-bye.